Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Ansible Automation Platform webinar, specifically for our public sector customers. Before we begin, I would like to take a few minutes just to give a brief overview of who we are at Fierce and what you will expect to learn at the webinar today. A quick introduction to our speaker and how you can access additional training or get additional questions answered after the webinar. So Fierce Software is a small women-owned business specializing in reselling enterprise open source software for our public sector customers. Specific value-add elements that we bring are innovation brokering, license management, professional services, formal training, and custom technology enablement workshops. Our perspective as a reseller means that we hear your goals and your technology challenges, and then we respond from the perspective of our portfolio and not a single vendor solution. We love to be an innovation broker, getting our customers access to the smartest people and the best technology that we can find. We like to hear the entire challenge and then take ownership of finding our customers a complete solution. In addition to being an innovation broker, we offer several other value adds if you need professional services as a part of an install, or for ongoing access to professional enterprise, we work with our vendor professional service teams and we can bundle those for you. We also provide access to formal training. Today, we're going to be talking about Red Hat training with Ansible Automation. Red Hat training is something that we've provided for some time now. Today's webinar is an example of one of our technology enablement information webinars. We designed these for free sessions to share best practices for implementation for your team. If you see something that fits today, we'd like to follow up with you. If it wasn't a fit, let us know what the gaps are with your specific needs, and we'd love to help. Speaking of all the enterprise open source vendors Fierce Software represents, I'd like to do a little humble brag today to showcase all of the awards that we've won. We are proud of our work serving public sector customers that have resulted in such a full trophy case in such a short amount of time. So to the webinar. Today's webinar, we will be focusing on the basics of Ansible Automation Platform, including an introduction to Ansible concepts, as well as a technical overview of how the tool can help organizations automate a vast array of tasks simply and consistently. As various teams within organizations begin to embrace automation to help their day-to-day lives, organizations are quickly realizing the importance of transparency and consistency in this practice is something that Ansible Automation will help as a challenge. Our quick agenda, a technical overview of Red Hat Ansible Automation Platform, a highlight of the new features that were introduced with the Ansible Automation Platform 2.4, and then finally how to leverage the new Red Hat training curriculum available in Red Hat Learning subscription to build and manage automation that scales. If formal training is something that you and your team are looking to get your hands on, or maybe you want to have further information about Ansible or the migration, please feel free to contact Fierce personnel. You'll be receiving an email from Lisa Brunk, our Red Hat training account executive, with the recorded copy of this webinar, as well as just a few questions to see how things went. You can feel free to contact Lisa or myself or the training and sales email on the screen for any further information you may need. In addition to training, please provide any feedback of what you liked from the webinar and what we can improve on for the next time. Now I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then pass it over to Rob, who will be going through all the technical side of the webinar. Rob, I think you're muted.
You're right. I left myself muted. There we go. So I'm Rob Locke. I'm a senior solutions architect with the training and certification division of Red Hat in North America. I've been with the training and certification team for many, many years. Started as an instructor, primarily teaching in Manhattan, but also worked for the curriculum team, built some of those wonderful exams that I'm sure you all love, and actually was a lab architect for how we run some of our classes for a while. Today, what I want to do is take a few moments to talk to you a little bit about one of the three pillars of Red Hat. The first pillar, of course, is Linux, Red Hat Enterprise Linux. The second pillar would be as we shift into container technology, where containers really are just sort of lightweight Linux bundles for running your applications and making it easier to deploy those. And then the third pillar is in automation, where we're going to be taking a look at Red Hat Ansible Automation Platform 2.4. My goal here is to not only give you a brief introduction as to where this is positioned, but we'll start to dive in a little bit about how we go about creating, managing, and scaling our automotive needs, and then also take a look at some of the new innovation that we've released in 2.4, one of which is fully supported in 2.4, that's event-driven Ansible. But then I also want to talk a little bit about Lightspeed. So we'll get a chance to take a look at how you can get signed up and start to work with Project Lightspeed, if that's something that interests you. So let's go ahead and jump in here. We start off with this general statement, anyone can automate. I started my career back in Unix, writing a bunch of C shell scripts to go ahead and manage my Sun OS systems. Of course, that has migrated to Bash, but now I've migrated to needing to be able to automate not just my Linux systems, but more of my enterprise. I need to be able to automate my network devices. I need to be able to automate things not only in the data center, but in the cloud or even out to the edge. So an enterprise needs to coordinate that activity and appropriately scale it. Most of us are dealing with a lot of the same challenges, right? Our IT infrastructures have built these silos, different individuals responsible for different elements of that infrastructure. They've all developed different skill sets. They've taken on these different roles. But what we're finding is a need to integrate those activities together. And unfortunately, for a long time, each of these silos would look to try to create their own ways of simplifying their tasks and trying to make it a little bit easier for them to accomplish the things at hand. And of course, we need appropriate governance of all of this, particularly for our larger enterprises as we move across multiple platforms, locations, and domains. So what is the solution for this? Well, it really is about breaking down these silos. What we need is a unified platform where we can all be speaking the same language, if you will, of automation. This unified platform then will allow us to have a consistent delivery model of updates, of management, of compliance checking. Speaking of compliance, we need an overall governance of this. But I don't want to hand over the keys to the kingdom to everybody within IT. I want to be able to manage this and perhaps have some access controls as to who's allowed to enact certain types of automation and where. So this is where Red Hat Ansible Automation Platform sort of comes into play for us. Ansible has become a de facto automation language. It is very simple to read, just basic text files. Admittedly, the YAML formatting and my need to space indent things sometimes drives me a little bonkers, but with a lot of the Visual Studios and other sort of IDEs, this becomes really quite easy to work with. It's wonderful in that it's a powerful language and that it can span across not only administering and automating my Linux devices, I can do my Windows VMs, I can go ahead and do my network devices, I can even automate some applications and some of the infrastructure inside of those. And really one of the keys that has helped Ansible to gain such popularity is its agentless sort of philosophy. We're not needing to install an Ansible component on each device or element that we're trying to automate. This works remotely into those devices and systems. We also have a ton of supported and certified content that you can ultimately trust. We've got over 150 certified content collections. We'll talk more about what a content collection is here in a little bit, but there's over 55 technology partners. And I'm guessing you probably will recognize one or two of the logos on the screen at the moment, where you can see the platforms, the elements, the devices that we can go ahead and automate. One of the other beauties of Ansible is that it can ultimately scale wherever you happen to be. If you want to implement it on just a regional basis, automating your data center, that can be done, but we do have the ability to scale to a global level and even automate out to the edge. So what exactly is Red Hat AAP, Ansible Automation Platform? Well, it's a platform for your whole automation team. The architecture is using containers now to make it that much more flexible on deploying and scaling to that enterprise. The content creation, we've added more tooling to make it easier for you to develop your own automation. And from an operational perspective, we are starting to integrate this even more into your environment. And as we talk about event-driven Ansible, my word, the ability for this automation to automatically be launched without us having to manually do it or click something to do it really helps us provide that real-time, up all the time type of environment. The content creation tools, as I mentioned, listed here on the left. So we've got some basic tools for creating the automation. We have and we'll hit each of these, an execution environment builder, the Ansible Navigator piece for you to do your content creation through, content collections that you can curate from lots of different sources, and then, of course, the new Ansible Lightspeed that's available as an unsupported tech preview at the moment. But we'll take a look at how you can get connected to that. The operational tools are you being able to put your curated content into a private automation hub, an automation controller that is managing the distribution of your automation tasks, automation mesh, which allows us to scale this to a more global footprint, and event-driven Ansible, which will help to close the loop for us. But how do we know whether or not automation is truly helping us? Well, that's where the business tools and analytics come in. And we offer a lot of tools within AAP, but we can also integrate this to Red Hat Insights if you're taking advantage of that service that's included with Red Hat Enterprise Linux. As I mentioned, we can scale. So Automation Controller provides the basic control plane, but with Automation Mesh, we can move that execution plane out across my entire enterprise in a very convenient and scalable method. We can do this across your entire IT footprint, whether you're looking to automate applications, network devices, cloud instances. You need to worry about compliance and security hunting and verification, threat hunting, incident response. We can do basic infrastructure and out to the edge. Now, how do you get into Ansible Automation Platform? Well, of course, you can self-manage it and put it on-premise or in the cloud within your own infrastructure, if that's something you want. But you can also have it deployed and managed by Red Hat within Azure. It's available on the Azure Marketplace. It's also available in the AWS Marketplace and Google Cloud Marketplace, but for the moment, those are self-managed instances. But being in the marketplace, they can tie into your committed spend that you perhaps have with those cloud providers. Now, let's start moving into what can I actually do with Ansible Automation Platform. And so the goal here is to allow your teams in IT to consistently create, manage, and scale. So we're going to take each of these three elements and sort of see how AAP can be applied to them. We'll start off with create. How do I go about creating automation? Well, we start with an Ansible ecosystem in the upper left here. What we have is a bunch of supported content that you can get to from console.redhat.com and take a look in Automation Hub, where we have all that certified content, that 150 plus certified collections where we've provided by the 55 partners. But then there's also the upstream community. And so you could take a look at some of that community content. Maybe there's not something in the supported sphere that does what you needed to do, so you can be pulling from the community also. Now, as we pull that ecosystem down into our content tools, we pull in those content collections, we start designing and developing our own playbooks. We have a VS Code extension, we have a linter to verify your formatting, and we have a tool called Ansible Navigator, which will allow you to go ahead and test and build and run these things. Then, as you are certifying your own content, the stuff that you've built, you can use Ansible Builder to create your own execution environments and definition files, and then put that curated content over to the right there in Private Automation Hub, where your execution environments and your content collections. Now, those may have ultimately come from the Ansible supported content, they may have come from the community, or they may be things that you've developed your own content collection for. But it's all curated, it's all signed by you, and so everyone in your organization can be comfortable with and know that what they're working with has been signed, published, certified by your automation team. We can do all of that through our own enterprise source control management. You might be doing it in a Git repo, that sort of thing, but all of that stuff can be stored in a centralized management structure. All right, so as we go to create, sitting at the center of what we're doing with Ansible is what we term Ansible Core. This is the main building block for Ansible. Ansible Core can be run directly, but for us in Red Hat Enterprise Linux, we only call Ansible Core with some specific curated collections. Our expectation with AAP is that you're going to be using execution environments, which I'll get to in a couple more slides. But Ansible Core provides the foundation on which we're going to build our playbooks. The playbooks are really just simple YAML syntax, so text files indented like you see here on the right. We have some CLI tools that will allow you to develop, test, and run these playbooks. And as mentioned, it is a pluggable architecture, so I can pull things in through the various content collections. Let's look a little closer at this. What's in a playbook? And so here's an example playbook for you. And as you look at it, simple syntax, I can just read the 4 name lines here and really get a sense for what this playbook is intended to do. And so up at the top name, I see there install and start Apache. And then indented from that appear to be 3 more names that make up how to install and start Apache. And apparently I start off by ensuring that the package is installed. I then go and create some content, index.html file, which is what will be served up by that Apache web server. And then I start the service if needed. And so the names that we have here in the playbook are providing me with, basic documentation about what it is that I need to accomplish. And by starting with names like this is where you're going to get into Lightspeed. This is where the AI is going to come in and help you to more quickly run and define these playbooks. So what makes up a playbook? Well, a playbook is made up of one or more plays. It's not unusual for a playbook to just have one play, but in general, there will be a play. Those plays will have tasks that typically call modules. Modules are that external content, the things that we're going to do. And then we add in some plugins that basically change the behavior of how we're going to be doing things. So looking at each of those three elements, what's a play? Well, a play is the top level specification for a set of tasks. You know, my ensure the HTTPD package is installed. All right, I'm doing this on the host's web and I want to become true. But the play is this top level definition. So it's that first name that I had at the top of that playbook. It's the one that's outdented the most to the left column. It tells us which hosts we're going to do this on. So apparently I've got some sort of inventory definition that web represents the set of hosts that I want to do this to. So multiple plays can exist in a playbook, but in many cases I may just have the one play. Then the play tends to refer to one or more tasks. And so I'll have a tasks line and then the list of tasks. The tasks we'll call modules. And so here you see highlighted the template module in this case. So Ansible built-in template is the full name of the module. In fact, this is one of the changes that has occurred with Ansible recently, where we've been more specific in declaring the name of the module. So built-ins tend to need the Ansible.builtin in front of them. And so thinking in terms of, well, what might this module be doing? A template looks like it's taking a source file and copying it to a destination. Now, technically, yes, you and I can be writing our own modules. Most modules are written in Python, or if you happen to be doing Windows systems, they'll probably be written in PowerShell. But technically, they could be written in anything. It's as long as the Ansible core, that the execution environment has the necessary supporting language elements. And so by default, we put Python in if this is being executed on a Linux system. The plugins are the little extra bits. And so, for example, become true, sitting up at the top there of my play, is identifying this little behavior change. Become true means that in order for me to accomplish these tasks, I need elevated privileges. I need to become the super user on that target system. And so if this is being done on a Linux system, I need to be root in order to accomplish these things. But there are also plugins. There are also plugins that will do some other things. Like, for example, there are some filter plugins which can allow us to inject some variable content into some nicely formatted JSON or YAML definitions. So we have plays, modules, and plugins. But as I'm developing this content, one of the things I may want to do is group a bunch of tasks together. You know, that concept of installing and starting Apache might be a role that I want to define. And so roles allow us to group and reuse these actions. So goal here is we write the roles once and then share them with others. How do I go about sharing those roles? Well, for example, I might have a role here that I've injected, and we'll see Ansible built-in include role, and the name of it is nginx app protect. And when you tend to pull in a role, you're going to pass some variables that identifies what that role should do. And so there we see the setup license, the remove license, and install signatures are the three variables that are needed for this particular role. But as I develop these roles, where do I put them? Well, I put them into my own content collections, or I obtain roles from these existing content collections that are out there. So instead of the Ansible built-in, it might be some other role definition. But this provides me with a consistent, portable, reusable, versioned, perhaps, environment to pull that content from. And so this might be existing underneath some other things. And so here I am, including a role named NGINX Inc., the app protect, as it was part of some content collection. So the content collection dot the name of the role. Where do I get these content collections? Well, I mentioned it a little bit earlier on, but we have Automation Hub, which has the certified content for us to work from. And you can go to console.redhat.com to see over 150 certified collections to draw on. Access to a hosted Automation Hub and content is included with your subscription to AAP. So you have access to all of that certified content. You can, in fact, point your infrastructure directly to that centralized Automation Hub to be pulling the content from. Or, as we'll see a little bit later on, you can curate and have just specific elements that you make available to your teams rather than letting them have access all 150. To help you with creating your own content, there is a VS Code extension. Most of us have used VS Code at one time or another. And so this will do the wonderful syntax highlighting of the keywords. It'll help to validate. It even has integration with another tool called Ansible Lint, which can help to confirm some of the syntax that you've been doing. But it'll autocomplete plays, blocks, task contents, those kinds of things. Ansible Lightspeed will help us to go ahead and try to build this content also a little bit quicker. I mention this as part of VS Code extension because this is an extension also to VS Code to be able to pull Lightspeed in. And so with that, we can have suggested content being pulled in to the automation that we are generating. I'll take a closer look at the tail end of this presentation about how you can get connected and a little bit closer look at Lightspeed in action. So we have these collections, we have dependencies, for example, different versions of Python, perhaps I'm doing PowerShell for the Windows stuff, and I've got my Ansible core runtime. I need to keep this stuff aligned. One of the big challenges with the older Ansible engine design of Ansible is that we would run into problems where an update to Python would break things. So to keep us aligned, we can bundle together these three elements. We do that with execution environments. So the purpose of an execution environment is to take those building blocks, that Ansible core, those dependencies, those collections that we're using, tie those all together with a Red Hat Universal Base Image, a core Linux environment, and we now have a container that we can go ahead and run our playbooks. If you want to build your own execution environments, of course, Automation Platform comes with a number of execution environments. But if you want to build your own with your own specific collections, your own specific dependencies, perhaps a different version of Ansible Core. You can build your own execution environment, but then how do you make that available to your organization? Well, we mentioned Automation Hub is the centrally Red Hat managed instance of content collections and execution environments. You can create your own private Automation Hub where you're putting just selected content collections or content collections you've been developing along with your execution environments, and then you can point your infrastructure to that private Automation Hub as the only place it's allowed to get things. So the signed, published, curated content that your automation team has put together. How do you go about building? Well, we've got a tool called Ansible Builder, which will go ahead and allow you to create that execution environment. Private Automation Hub, as I mentioned, allows us to collaborate as a team and build that curated content. You can be pulling from Automation Hub. The community version of those content collections, by the way, is called Ansible Galaxy. And then, of course, your own custom enterprise content. So whatever you're pulling from, you can pull that into your private Automation Hub, sign and publish that content, and now there's a level of trust for your enterprise to use that content. Ansible Navigator is a front-end tool that can either be done from the command line or through a little bit of a TUI, a text user interface, to go ahead and run your playbooks as you design and test them with a prescribed execution environment that you may have pulled from the private Automation Hub or the public one. Ansible Navigator, as I mentioned, can be done from the command line. So if you might be used to having historically run the Ansible command to go ahead and run a playbook, well, this is how you do the same thing with Ansible Navigator. Just a slight tweak of syntax, just put the whole word Ansible Navigator in front, can go ahead and run your elements. The advantage here is that it's reviewing your execution environments to confirm that they work with your playbook, all right, and helps you in developing your own collections and playbooks, and has a nice troubleshooter built into it. Ansible Lint can be called from the command line. Remember, we can also have that integrated with VS Code if we want, but Ansible Lint can help to, we'll say, ensure that we're following some best practices as we're writing that YAML code. All right, so that's the creation process of looking to create some automation. How about the management process? Well, this is where operations wants to take over. And so, again, we've talked about this idea of being able to develop, run, publish it into a private automation hub. And then operations can then take that handoff and start to work with it there. Again, enterprises need a little bit more control of this automation, right? So we've got credential management. We want to integrate that to some form of identity management system. We want to be able to define maybe some role-based access controls as we manage our users. We want some centralized logging so that we can appropriately audit what has been going on, all right? And maybe even integrate this into some other systems. We'll see in a few moments. So there are really two ways we're looking at wanting to be able to launch automation. Traditionally, earlier versions of Ansible Automation Platform 2, all we could do is the defined automation. So the stuff resides there in our private automation hub. We use Automation Controller to go ahead and say, all right, run this automation off on this set of hosts, or this set of containers, or this set of VMs, whatever it happens to be. But it required humans to interact and say, launch this. Even if we're looking to do some SecOps work where we're trying to confirm that our systems are not susceptible to something. We may have some defined automation that can go out and verify instances that are out there and what's going on. But again, I had to launch it with defined automation. In AAP 2.3, we started introducing, as a preview, the availability of event-driven automation. So with event-driven automation, what happens is we are monitoring the logs. We can take input from your infrastructure, have some rules, which then spawn through controller to go ahead and run the automation, that defined automation. So this is allowing us now in 2.4 really to close the loop. Of course, we've got our analytics across the top. So automation controller sits at the center of this. It is the thing that is allowing us to control where the automation is running. So the users get to define, they get to operate, they can delegate automation across their enterprise. It has a web UI that most folks will go in to use, but there's also an API, and we'll talk a little more about that in a little bit too. How your content runs is all based upon what automation controller is doing. And so you can define these job templates. So sort of prescribed ways to go out and do these things. That can be pulling information from the inventories, pulls credentials, grabs the content collections and execution environments, maybe from my private automation hub, and we can have projects. And we can define role-based access controls to those projects and the various other elements. Only certain people are allowed to pull and perform certain actions. I mentioned identity and access management, so we can integrate to your existing identity and access management solution. So whether you happen to be using Active Directory, some other form of LDAP, or maybe some token-based system, whatever it happens to be, we can integrate that into Automation Controller so that the users can be predefined for us to define the role-based access controls. Ultimately, the job template is used to create a job. You and I can be monitoring through the controller web UI you see there on the right how those jobs are progressing. There's an API. So let's say you have a system, an environment, let's say some IT service management solution that you want to be able to integrate so that you could define a button. Maybe in that help desk software that goes off and runs some prescribed solution, some automation nugget out on that user's system. Through the API, we can do all of that integration. We have a dashboard, of course, so that you can see how the stuff is running. Again, all of this through the web UI of the controller. Might help you to all of a sudden spot some irregularities that are going on in that environment. Now, event-driven Ansible, I want to dive in a little bit on this because this is one of the new pieces. So with event-driven Ansible, what we're looking to do is to try to figure out from observing certain activities that are happening in your infrastructure, then evaluate and respond by running some defined automation. And so we observe, evaluate, and respond. Keep those three in mind. Because that's how we're going to go about defining rule books. See, we had playbooks as defined automation. Rule books are helping us to define what we're observing, how to evaluate it, and how we're going to respond. So these rule books, as you see an example here, will go off and take a look at things. And so we have some sources, what we're observing. We've got some evaluation, the condition that we're looking at, And then how do we respond? That's the action. We're apparently going to run some job template that's been defined. So, sources, conditions, and actions. This is what makes up our rule book. And so we refer to the group of all three as a rule set, but then the conditions and actions as a set of rules. And it makes sense because you're not going to define the source or be pulling from a source, for each rule. You collect the data coming from your sources, maybe some logging system. And as those messages are coming in, you've got conditions. And so you'll have a number of conditions and actions that you want to execute based upon that source. So in the rule set, again, top level specification, we identify the sources and the rules within this, but at the top, we're identifying things like the inventories this is being applied to. Then we define the sources, all right? Where is this information going to come from? And there are a number of predefined sources that you'll be able to integrate into EDA here, to event-driven Ansible. And we'll continue adding some more as time goes on. But then we can go ahead and filter. If I'm getting a bunch of log messages coming in from some alert manager here, perhaps I want to filter those, and that we have to have the phrase alert, as to being something that we want to consider processing and comparing to a rule. All right, so we can do some data transformation before passing to the rules. And this is a good idea. You don't want to send everything to the rules. It just slows down the process. So you want to be thoughtful about how you're passing things through EDA. Then with the rule, we'll define conditions. And so we're looking for SE Linux disabled as the alert that's there. And then the action will be what we're going to go ahead and ultimately do. Now, think of it as a if then else. If this is true, then this is what we're going to do. So with event-driven Ansible controller, so we have an EDA controller. This is another web UI that we can plug in. We can go in and view the rule books that we want to put into action. And of course, doing audits, role-based access controls, a lot of the same elements that we have in the controller interface. Now, the last piece I want to talk about in terms of management of this in my create and manage environment is I want to be able to analyze and aggregate the information that's happening here. And so there are analytics, there are reports within Ansible controller that can be run. There's even an automation calculator that can help you to define and observe the savings from automation. And help you even plan ahead of time. How much is this going to save me? We can also integrate this activity into Red Hat Insights, and so that you can be spawning playbooks, because that's what Insights will give me. It'll notice something wrong, it'll give you a remediation playbook, and I can go ahead and spawn that on those hosts. Now, the last piece there, we had create, manage. We also need to scale. The way I'm going to be able to scale is by being able to put those execution environments near the elements that I want to go ahead automate. So those execution environments going out on an execution plane through automation mesh. We can, as you're trying to govern this, we can also define needed human interaction. I mean, this concept of automation doesn't mean that the robots are going to run the world. There are still times when humans need to assess and define and confirm and say, yes, go ahead and do that. Because there could be other criteria that we're perhaps not able to code in to the automation. I mentioned we could tie this into your IT service management tool. And so we have some prescribed integrations that we've already done with some vendors. For example, if you happen to be using ServiceNow, we have integrated to that one. But we can also, through the API, be integrating to pretty much any of them. I mentioned automation mesh, putting the execution plane there on the bottom out close to the devices, the nodes, the systems that I want to go ahead and manage within this. So automation controller up top is the user interface, my control plane, and then automation mesh, if I want to implement it. Again, it depends upon your scale. You don't have to. We can just have an execution plane that controller goes to directly without mesh. But mesh allows us to provide some fault tolerance to our automation. So, what are the use cases for all of this? Well, remember, we started with those silos, all of these different groups not being able to work together. And so, maybe you're one of those DevSecOps folks, and you want to be able to help. You want help on investigating compromises. You want to hunt for potential threats. You want to be able to properly whitelist, blacklist, or quarantine a machine in a more automated fashion. And so we can provide an appropriate response and remediation with Ansible. We can manage your network devices. We can verify configurations of those network devices, providing backup and restore. We can even do some planned network changes, configuration changes, rolling those out in an appropriate fashion. In essence, automating your network operation. Hybrid cloud. As you start to move your applications into that hybrid cloud, how do I go about making sure that I have visibility into that infrastructure and be able to support that cloud migration? Maybe some of your elements are in a public cloud. Maybe there's some cloud native applications running in your own infrastructure. Maybe they're running in some other private cloud that you've put together. So being able to automate the troubleshooting of those cloud environments so that you know what is up and running. In essence, as it says here, tame your clouds. I mentioned the integration to ServiceNow, so we're able to, in essence, allow you to operate and have a source of truth of what you're working with in your enterprise. So as those help desk tickets come in, as you have incidents, problems, tasks, change requests, all of those things, we can update the records, but then we can also spin this out to automatically go out and not only do query information, but also launch various remediation. Mentioned a couple of, earlier that we can automate Windows systems, whether those are bare metal systems, virtual machines, being able to manage the elements of those. You can see sort of a list of some of the basic configuration and operational things that many people want to be able to do with their Windows systems. All of that can be managed through AAP. Again, the goal here is a consistent, simple, common language that we're all operating with. And we're able to support all of these different platforms because of the modularity of Ansible Automation Platform. I can be grabbing content collections for different types of devices, different types of platforms to be able to pull in and support the full configuration and management of these systems. Obviously, we do Linux systems. I mean, that should go without saying. We can also manage and automate activities with your OpenShift cluster, going out there and ensuring, your business continuity as you start developing that next generation of cloud native applications. In fact, we can tie all of this stuff together with traditional DevOps. We can, in essence, by automating the activities, I mean, that's really what DevOps is trying to do, right? That whole reduce toil. Get rid of those mundane tasks that we have to do over and over again. If we can automate those tasks, we can be freed up to do some of that bigger thinking, that more creative thinking of other things that we can do to innovate and improve our environments. Go as far as, the concept that everything is code. Well, again, if the developers, if operations, if we're all working from a common automation platform, we can make all of this stuff possible. And then close the loop. Observe, evaluate, automate with event-driven Ansible. Even tie this into your GitOps functionality as the developers are building their applications. We can pull that in to Ansible also to allow for that continuous integration, that continuous delivery, that release early, release often sort of philosophy that most of us are having to shift towards. Go out to the edge. Be able to manage those systems. Doing this a lot with telco industry, for example, the cell towers, being able to manage those. All right, with the few minutes that I have left, I wanted to sort of speed through that beginning part to give you an opportunity to find out a little bit more about Ansible Lightspeed, what we traditionally refer to as Project Lightspeed. What this is allowing us to do is to start taking a look at adding AI to the process of building our automation. So, what are some things you need to know about this tech preview? Well, it's now available to all Ansible users for free. There's no additional subscription needed, anything like that. You don't even need an AAP subscription. You could be using the community version of Ansible with Lightspeed if you like. Just need a GitHub ID in order to be able to pull down the code. And again, this is being done as a VS Code extension, so you'll need this. Now, it is a limited service to start with. So the real primary capability for you is to be able to go in and help you in generating the task of your playbook. We're working on other elements, and you may see some more stuff announced later this year into early next year. But at least for the task generation stuff, that is pretty well baked for you to be able to take advantage of. Now, it is a tech preview. It is with no support, self-supported service, but there are some docs available there in GitHub for you to be able to pull down. Now, the AI component is really IBM Watson under the hood, and so it's IBM Watson's code assistant that is going in. We've been teaching Watson about Ansible playbooks and tasks and that sort of stuff, and the goal here is to streamline your ability to write those tasks. Now, one of the things it goes through with this VS Code extension is it goes ahead, and as you start writing the name, of what it is you're trying to accomplish, it then is going to come up with the module and the elements that you need to put in to accomplish what we perceive to be the task from the name you've defined. This is helping us to define some best practices. We are collecting data as you're using this, but it is anonymized. But the processing that goes on is going ahead and pull in a fully baked task for you to be able to tweak. Our goal here is trying to make it easier for you to write Ansible code. One of the concerns for a lot of folks when they first start working with Ansible is getting used to writing that task syntax. And so the goal here is to take even basic folks who are just beginning to learn Ansible and trying to make them productive. But even for those of us that have been doing Ansible for a while, allowing us to sort of speed up. Every once in a while I'm being asked to write a playbook to automate a device that I haven't really spent much time with. With Lightspeed, it's able to go out there and help get me going a lot faster than me pouring through all the documentation and trying to figure it out on my own. And so as you see here, what it's doing is it's defining a name. I want to include a role. And so it goes ahead and puts in the task, puts in the name of the module, puts in the name of the role. And so it's just suggesting that. So it's a natural language task description that you're writing. It will go ahead and look to generate that task. Now, one of the things that there might be some concern about is, well, where did this suggestion come from? And so part of what we're doing is we're identifying sources, authors, licenses, if there are any. Everything is done in an open source fashion at the moment. But ultimately, eventually, you'll be able to teach your own stuff into this so you can have your own curated content working with this. So what do we do to make this happen? All right, so here are the steps that you're going to be going through. First, you install the Ansible VS Code extension to VS Code. All right, get that all installed. Then, within that Ansible VS Code extension, you want to enable Ansible Lightspeed. You'll go into the gear icon, select the extension settings. Then in the workspace settings, we can go ahead and enable Ansible Lightspeed. There's a couple of different checkboxes there that you look to enable. Once you've enabled the extension support, then what we need to do is connect and sign in to the Lightspeed service. So you'll click on the Ansible A in the activity bar. It'll bring up this dialog welcoming you to the Ansible Lightspeed for Visual Studio Code. You click on Connect. You get a new pop-up window you want to allow and open. You need your GitHub credentials to be able to pull down the content and information. You'll need to accept the terms and conditions and then authorize Lightspeed within VS Code to be able to go ahead and populate that information. So again, just GitHub credentials and some Ansible elements that you're doing with VS Code. Now, we are encouraging everybody with the tech preview to go ahead and provide feedback to us about their experience. Is this helping you? Is it meeting your automation development needs? We also could use some help in improving our recommendations that are coming from this initial rollout, but it is all there and available for you to start playing with. The key differentiators of what we're trying to do is to make a transparent, collaborative, and give you lots of choice as you're looking to build. We know as part of the open source community that the only way that things get built in a quality, speedy fashion is through open source, through the collaborative power that all of us working together can go ahead and create. This is singularly focused on automation as opposed to looking at some of the other AI bots that are out there that people are playing with. This is specifically built to focus on Ansible, and it natively integrates with the tool chain that we think most folks are using. So here's the snapshot. For the links and the instructions and that sort of stuff that you saw me speeding through with the slide, you can see that in the video recording. But the one URL that I recommend you perhaps just jot down right now is redhat.com/Ansible-Lightspeed. that will go ahead and give you that information that I just went through about how you can tie in your Ansible work to that. Oops. All right, so where do I go from here? Well, to decrease the time to market with Ansible Automation, since I work for the training and certification team, as you guessed it, I'm going to recommend training. But it's not just me recommending. IDC published a white paper that said that folks were 59% quicker deploying their new IT resources after taking the training. We have training modalities to meet you where you are, whether you prefer instructor-led in a public setting, where you might be in a room with people from lots of different companies, and then you can learn from those other individuals. We do them in person. We also do everything virtually, instructor-led. We also do private on-site training, again, in person or virtually, whatever works best. But then it's just people from your organization going ahead and being able to ask some of those pointed questions about your environment without worrying about whether or not you're disclosing it to some competitor that happens to be in the room. We also have the on your schedule, self-paced, 90-day access to the course content, videos, and up to 80 hours of the same hands-on labs as what you see over in the instructor-led. We also have our, consume all you can in a year Red Hat Learning subscription, where you have access to the entire portfolio for a year and can work through that. There are different tiers to the Red Hat Learning subscription. If you happen to use Red Hat Learning Subscription Premium, this really gives you the hybrid solution. You can be logging into various half-day sessions where we've taken a half day of the content from that course on a prescribed schedule, where you can go in and there's a live instructor delivering that half day of content. And so you can do some of that interaction if that can help you over a hurdle. The course is specifically for our automation portfolio. What I will tell you is that we have some foundational. H294 teaches you the basics of creating playbooks, working with modules, defining roles, those kinds of things. But I can also do that with DO457 and DO417. The difference between the three courses is really focused on the use case. But I'd say 80% of the content is focused on the foundations of Ansible. So you could be happy in any of the three to learn that 80% of content. The last 20% tends to get specific to the particular platform. We also have services management. Remember the old RHCE program from back when, where we made you do a myriad of services on that exam? Well, we've updated it. It's now RH358, that myriad of services, but you are managing it with Ansible using automation to work with it. A follow-on to the foundational curriculum, the advanced AAP 2.x courses, we have DO374 and DO467, where we're doing some of the advanced practices in DO374. And then 467 is really where we start focusing on controller. So that control plane, and maybe even a little bit of mesh, but mostly about the control plane, about how do I define users, how do I establish some of those controls within Ansible controller, is all done in 467. With each of these courses, there is the corresponding EX, which would be the exam associated with that if you're looking for certification. So I want to thank you. I went a couple of minutes over here. I haven't seen any questions showing up in the chat or the Q&A, but if there's anything I can help you with, feel free to put them in there, or I'll turn it back over to Fierce to close us out.
Thanks so much, Rob. That was awesome. Again, if you guys have any questions, you'll get an email from Lisa Brunk after this with the recorded copy. Please feel free to share with your colleagues who may be interested in the content. and you can ask her questions or sales@fiercesw.com or training@fiercesw.com. Thank you so much for coming, and we look forward to everyone joining the next webinar we have with Red Hat. Have a good day, guys.
Bye.